Good evening and a warm welcome to Big Budget Business. Now, as young people in business and creatives, it's important for us to understand words such as intellectual property, patent, and trademark. Today, we speak to the founder of Botswana's very first intellectual property consultancy, Letlhogonolo Moremi. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure.
Now, before we get into it, I just need to mention how, as creatives on the team producing this show, a lot of people were excited about how we're going to have you on the show and the issues that we'll be discussing today. So thank you so much for being here.
You're most welcome.
All right, so let's start with an introduction of yourself, your background and everything.
Well, my name is Letlhogonolo Moremi, as you've already mentioned. I am a 26-year-old boy from Khabani. I grew up in Khabani. I schooled in Gaborone for most of my life, and then I went to varsity and studied law. But that's not where the journey towards where I am began. I mean, I've always been creative as a child. I was that child at primary school who was singing in every talent show. So I was singing every talent show, and then when I get home, I am tearing my toys apart and trying to build them into something else.
I think I can relate.
So it was whether it was science, whether it was art, whether it was some. As long as I was creating, I was really in my happy place as a child. So then the journey perhaps towards working in innovation and in creativity began for me at that early stage. And then when, with my passion for law and studying law, it was just a combination of the two for me to become, the intellectual property law consultant that I am today.
All right, because I was actually going to ask how the entrepreneurship aspect came into being.
Right.
Maybe if you can just give us a bit more detail about when you started and how you got to basically where you are.
Okay, great. I've always been a busy person. I think ever since childhood, I've always been a busy child. I was the child who goes to class and then goes to I was never really good at sports. So for me, it was the other clubs, right? And then, just around the age of 17, I think I was in Form 4, I had my first job. I worked as a marketing intern at a music studio called Empress Production. And, I was writing poetry at the time. So I started getting into business then. I did the marketing for Empress Production for a couple of years. And then when I started in university, I joined a company called DM Creative Brands, which is a brand management and PR management company. And then I met some really brilliant people along the way, Mr. Thapelo Borekile being one of them, who had founded the company. And, at every stage, I think my objective was never to just work with people and, be a part of whatever they're doing. It was that, but it was also what can I learn and what can I do better. For me, growth has always been an important thing. So exposing myself to things and developing myself from that exposure has always been a huge part of my journey towards where I am today.
Oh, that's great. Okay. I think what I picked up there is growth.
Right.
Constant improvement.
Right.
And then also, just creativity, wanting to do or create better things.
Right.
Than what's there.
Yeah. We're all students of. Learning is a process that doesn't stop until you die.
Absolutely.
So to live through, to go through life living as if you are not supposed to be learning and improving yourself is to sort of deny yourself a life that you could be living.
Wow, I like that. Exactly.
No.
And then you did mention the exposure part too.
Yes.
Right? No.
Yes.
Now, let's speak about ParkGrey IP.
Right.
Now, this is the first intellectual property consultancy in Botswana.
Absolutely.
Entrepreneurship is generally about spotting opportunities.
Absolutely.
Tell us how you spotted this gap.
It was less spotting and more pursuing. Because for me, like I said, innovation and creativity have always been important. And, with my legal studies that I pursued passionately as well, it was more about where do I create a place for myself in the world, So that was my place that I needed to. It just so happened that nobody had filled that spot before. But for me, being the first wasn't an important thing.
Great.
But being the solution provider that I wanted to be was the more important thing. So that's how ParkGrey came about. It was founded in November 2019, but even before the foundation of ParkGrey, I was consulting. Like I had always been, like I said, always been passionate about creativity. So I'd been consulting on creative projects in different capacities. It got into some IP work as well, and then when the time was right and it was time to take the leap, it was time to start ParkGrey.
Wow, that's great. So I take it it's been sort of a process of self-discovery too for you.
Absolutely,
Wow.
absolutely. It's always been about refining. I think I'm one person who believes in refining yourself over time and refining your vision over time, and always dedicating yourself to whatever is your vision at that point in time. So over when I was in brand and PR, that PR was where I needed to be, because I needed to learn something. I needed to make something, some connections, some knowledge that would guide me towards my next step. So my next step then became the IP work that I'm doing now. So I think constantly refining. Maybe in 5 years' time, I'll be on the moon. Who knows?
It's very possible.
Right.
Sky's the limit. Well,
Right.
in this case, the moon.
Right.
Yes. So, yes, I like how this whole process of self-discovery, you were at some point to learn something. This
Absolutely.
ties into, what we discuss generally on the show, is that entrepreneurship tends to be a journey of evolution.
Right.
And when you're in this business, then you find that you end up navigating fields or challenges that you actually had never anticipated altogether. So I'm sure it's
Absolutely.
been quite an interesting journey for you.
Absolutely. And I think, the first time I thought of starting a business, I was 18. I was 18, 19. And I tried forming this company. I can't remember what it was supposed to do. But I trust the process, because I think in hindsight, it's where I needed to be at that time. It was oh yes, I think I wanted to start an artist management company.
Okay.
Right. I think I remember now. So, but it was where I felt I needed to be at that point in time. And I think the journey of doing that and failing at that and learning along the way, allows you to become a better business person, a better entrepreneur at the end of the day.
Wow. That's great. So I'm going to ask you for some definitions.
Right.
Your definitions,
Uh-huh.
which are related, of course, to what your business does.
Right.
The first one being, what would your definition of intellectual property be?
Right. So intellectual property refers to, well, firstly, property. That is the result of application of, the mind's creative capacities. So, for example, now, right now you have your show, Big Budget.
Yes.
Yes. You have your show, and it's the result of the application of your creativity to say, okay, I want to put 2 and 2 together to create 2 and 2 together to create 4, and that 4 would be your intellectual property. It's about the ideas that you produce, the solutions that you create, whether they're in the artistic sphere, whether they're in the scientific sphere, medical sphere, whatever. It applies across the board. So intellectual property then is that thing that those things, those intangible things you create with your mind.
Oh, okay. No, that's great. And then this would then be related to the term intellectual asset
Absolutely.
when I own it now.
Absolutely, because once you have created it and once it's taken some shape or form, and it just can't exist without value, because no property exists without value, right? Even if it's worth 1 pula, it's still
Yes,
a certain
value.
amount of value. So then it's about knowing that what you have in fact produced is an economic asset, and and it's an economic asset. It has value. It can be sold. It can be bought. It can be stolen, etc.,
Can be
etc.
stolen. That's scary. Yeah.
etc., etc. But yes, but like you're saying, it's then the collection of what you have created. Then whether it's again, because once you've created a product, and the different forms of intellectual property rights or different intellectual property laws will apply depending on what you have created, right?
Okay.
So, for example, if you've written a book, what you would what would apply as a copyright, right? Or for example, if you want to protect the brand Big Budget, what would apply as a trademark?
It's protected, all right. Anyway.
Great stuff, man. So it depends on what you have created, and how what you've created can be protected. And those things that you're protecting are in fact, yes, economic assets, economic value, sell, trade, the works.
All right. Very interesting. All right. What about the term patent?
Patent. Right. Now, patent is a form of intellectual property. A patent is basically a set of rights that are given to the creator or the owner of a certain technical solution or a certain technical process. These usually apply to just how things are, like I'm saying, technical solutions or technical processes. So, for example, what you have in front of you there is that particular product that I will not name unless the owners are paying me to say its name.
Interesting.
Right.
Yeah.
So that particular product there, basically it comprises of certain parts that work in certain ways, right? So you will find that each one of those parts has been created for the specific purpose of creating a particular result, right? And therefore, the protection that is given to the person who made those parts or the person who owns those parts, right? Such that nobody else can produce these parts, nobody else can put them together in this particular way. That would be a patent, right?
Yeah. Wow. Okay, and then how does this differ from trademark?
Right. So a trademark then applies to any sign or distinction any sign that you can use to distinguish your product or services from that of the next person, right? So trademarks are about protecting business interests generally, right? So when you have something that we can, when you have something that is particular to you, because let's also consider that business comes with goodwill, right?
Yes, of course.
So people buy into your product because they believe in your product and they associate it with certain things. So I wouldn't want to walk around calling myself Big Budget and then making making a living off of your name like that. You know what I mean? So a trademark is a protection that you would then receive to prevent other people from being able to use or exploit this thing, this brand that you have, and it can be a name, it could be a color, it could be a design, it could be whatever is particular to you that identifies your business from that of the next person. When you apply for a registration and you seek legal protection, the protection you would get is a trademark protection.
Yes. Right. All right. So in this case, this would be perhaps my logo, Big Budget, with that TM in the corner over there at the top.
Right.
Yes.
Right.
So when I place that on my T-shirts, on wherever, on merchandise that I'd like to sell, I've trademarked my product, and you are liable to legal action if you try and duplicate that in any way.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Right.
And then you did mention copyright. Can you just run through that one again?
So copyright then applies to artistic and literary works. So this would be like your music, your poems, your art, your paintings, your rap music. It applies to things like dance and film and all of that. So copyright then it's a set of rights that's given to the creator of such a product, or a person who owns that set of rights. Now, I'm saying a person who owns because I maybe have been the one, to draw this very beautiful thing behind us, but maybe I drew it because you were paying me to, right?
Yes.
So then you own the copyright. You're not the creator, but you own it because
the same way I can write you a song.
The same way you could write
me a song. It would be copyright to you because you paid me.
Absolutely.
And we're done.
Absolutely.
Our agreement ends there.
Absolutely. So then it applies to works that are created in that sphere of art and literature and film and all of that. And the interesting thing about copyright, especially within the context of Botswana, is that copyright is protected by the fact of creation. So if I wrote a book today or if I wrote a song today, I don't need maybe to wait for somebody to come and register and see this and say this for that song to be protected by copyright. As long as I have put it in some tangible form, then there is copyright protection that applies.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, that's great. So I see you're talking a lot about artistic works, and this brings me to the question. Tell me about your thoughts on entrepreneurs, innovators, and creatives generally. What do you think is the importance of these three, let me call them demographics, basically, on the overall economy? What are your thoughts on these three groups?
Right. You know, it's interesting because I don't know how many times I've repeated this, but I'm going to repeat it again. You know, the thing is, you know, the African continent, especially for me, is a focal point, and the African continent has the largest population of the youngest people on the planet, right? So these are people whose minds are still very agile with ideas. These are people whose minds are still very agile with producing solutions, and you know, those are the people that I believe will be if we harness that power, those will be the catalysts to what creating change that we want to see. And you know, there's a lot of talk that globally, resource-based economies are beginning to fail. Which means a lot of economies are transitioning towards skills, towards knowledge. There's a lot of talk in Botswana about a knowledge-based economy.
Of course.
That knowledge-based economy is going to depend on the entrepreneurs, the creatives, the solution providers to be creating new things and to be basically creating what you would call a creative economy. That's an economy that thrives on ideas, that thrives on solutions, and the exchange of ideas and the exchange of solutions. So I really think entrepreneurship and creativity and such, that is the future that we ought to be investing in. The capacities of those people are the future that we ought to be investing in, because we kind of have run out of everything else, and we kind of need to invest in in those capacities. Yeah.
Absolutely. So I take it at home there listening, you entrepreneur, innovator, creative, you are the one who holds the future. So go out there and do something about it. Now, tell me, how does the work of ParkGrey IP differ from that of the Companies and Intellectual Property Authority?
Right. So the Companies and Intellectual Property is a regulatory body. So the Companies and Intellectual Property Authority, under there you would find the Register of Trademarks and things like that, or the Register of Industrial Property rather. So what they do is they basically they are the administrators, or the body that's in charge of of implementing what the provisions of the Copyright and Neighboring Rights Act, the provisions of the Industrial Property Act. What we do is we are a private entity that helps people take advantage of those or make use of those frameworks. It's the laws, it's the act, it's taking advantage of the services that SEPA provides. So we basically help our clients access those things, and we help our clients be able to use those things for their benefit, because it's more or less like what a lawyer does for the courts. Right? Without a lawyer, the courts are not very useful for the ordinary person.
Yes.
So that's really just what we do.
Right, that's very interesting. Now, let's talk about ParkGrey IP's biggest challenge thus far.
Right. I mean, the company was born the firm was born in 2019, right at the beginning of the COVID-19 pandemic. So it was a very interesting time to be starting out in business. Operated for a couple of months, had to shut down because of lockdown and all of things like that. So that severely affected business. But I think we believe strongly in what we do, and and you find ways. And also, I think the good thing about the lockdown is so many people went into this creative mode across different sectors. People were just in this very creative space, and now coming out of that, we find ourselves with quite a bit of work on our hands.
A lot.
So that was good. But I think one of my other challenges that really worries me is the lack of knowledge about intellectual property, which of course it's a challenge that people do not know, and therefore do not know they need your service. But it's also an opportunity to teach people about what they need, and and play the role of an educator and create a whole new market base. So it's both a challenge and an opportunity, but I find it regrettable that so many people do not know what they need to do in order to make the best out of their intellectual labor.
Wow.
Yeah.
All right. On a lighter note, you did mention that you used to sing at every single talent show.
Please do not ask me to sing, because I will not.
All right. No, I was going to ask you to sing. But anyway, I just wanted to know, is there anything else that you're involved in outside of ParkGrey IP?
Right. Ooh, I juggle a few things. So I'm in my capacity as founder of ParkGrey IP. I'm also part of a company called DM Creative Brands. We do brand management and PR.
Oh, great.
I also, run an organization known as Queer Pride Botswana, which does, whose mandate is we basically create spaces for LGBTQ persons and allies in Botswana through the medium of art, and just create like gatherings where everybody can just sort of like chill and get to know each other, because we just want to build that network.
Yeah.
And then I'm also a volunteer with the Gaborone Book Festival. And then I don't know, I'm also my mother's child, amongst
That's
other
great.
things.
Yeah, no, that's great.
You're right.
Shout out to moms.
I'm also this child, and that's a job on its own. So I'm like I said, I've never been. I think I'm much like my grandparents. Now thinking about it on the set, I think I'm very much like my grandparents, because my grandparents would never sit still, and my mother's somebody who doesn't sit still as well. They're always working. And so I used to hate it as a child, because you'd be sitting there and somebody's like, yeah, tamo, and it's like I just sat down 2 minutes ago. But now growing up, I realize I have the same spirit, just in a different form.
Yes.
I'm always working on something because I like to just be producing constantly. So yeah.
Well, that's great. Very interesting.
Yeah.
So, lastly, how can people access the services of ParkGrey IP?
Great. So firstly, we have a website, www.parkgrey.com. That's ParkGrey.com. And then you can also email me at moremi@parkgrey.com. That's moremi@parkgrey.com. Spelling almost failed me.
Wow.
But otherwise, you can contact me on 73410039. That's +267 73410039. Or find us on social media, ParkGrey IP on all platforms.
Oh, that's great.
Right.
Letlhogonolo, let me thank you so much for your time.
Thank
It's
you
been
for
an
having
interesting
me.
interview.
Thank you.
We hope to have you back soon also.
I hope so too.
All
I
right.
hope so too.
Thanks so much.
All right.
Right, our 2-minute tip for today. Now, we all know that time is that one invaluable resource that we can't regain once we've lost. So we thought it fit today to discuss a few issues about time management. Now, time management is an important aspect for us as young business people, because it can impact the efficiency and effectiveness of our businesses, and it can also help us to solve different problems without necessarily hampering our day-to-day operations. Now, in thinking about this time management issue, there are 4 basic principles. Number 1, prioritize. This basically involves you ranking your objectives or activities in order of importance, and then following through with that list. Number 2, planning. Planning is an essential strategy for you to set your objectives and then also set your timelines and then follow that plan. Number 3, minimize distractions. Ask yourself when you're busy, is it really time, or is it really important for me to be on social media right now? Should I really be talking to my colleagues about the weekend we just had? Think about such aspects. And then number 4, know when to delegate. Now, there will be value-adding activities in your business that you may have to be in control of, and then there will be those others that are a bit less important, which you can pass on to other team members. So let's learn how to balance that. So once again, in thinking about this time management aspect, remember to prioritize, to plan, to minimize distractions, and to know when to delegate. It's been a wonderful show. Thank you so much for your time. From me, Big Budget, and the team, it's good night and God bless. And never forget that you were born for so much more.